So I just want your help and insight about that. How do you feel about it? And what is your experience while coaching adults and everything?
Thank you so much. Well, first, I want to acknowledge that you have opened up and expanded into supporting adults. This is wonderful. And it's such a natural transition when you are a pregnancy and child sleep consultant like yourself, a holistic one, that you expand into working with the parents. And one of the things that some of you who may be watching us may not be aware of is that in our certification program, our holistic pregnancy and child sleep consultant certification program, we place a lot of attention on the parents and how our child sleep consultants can support the parents through this journey. As Prithi said, they're not necessarily worried about their own sleep, but in fact, their energy, their beliefs, their lifestyle absolutely influence their child's. So paying attention to the parents is a very natural progression when you're working with child sleep. So Priti has had the really great opportunity and experience of working with both children and the parents and segueing into adult sleep in that way. And now, from what I'm hearing, when you've been giving talks and expanding your work, you've had 20 and 30-year-olds coming up to you saying, hey, I know you've been working with child sleep and with parents, but do you work with non-parents? And so it sounds like this has excited you, correct? It sounds like this is something that lit you up and you say, wow, this is great. I actually would love to help other adults, not just parents. Is that correct?
Totally correct.
Okay, so now that we've established that this lights you up and that you enjoy doing it and you want to expand into this, what I'm hearing you say is that you have some doubts and maybe you lack a little bit of confidence because what's happened is when you've begun dabbling into this, you recognize that once you start working with them, they're not being consistent and they're not sticking to a plan. Maybe they'll try something for 2 to 3 days and then they'll stop. Is that correct? Okay. So there could be a number of reasons why this happens. So first and foremost, when you had asked for my opinion, you said, Mar, what do you think about working with adults? Adults come in all shapes and sizes, not just physically, but mentally. You're going to have adults that are very disciplined. You're going to have adults that are not disciplined. You're going to have adults that have very limiting beliefs. You're going to have adults that have more openness and are open to breaking patterns in their beliefs. So you have a wealth to choose from. When you are going to work with any adult, the most important thing is to set up the pre-consult in a way where, in the same way you do with child sleep, you're going to figure out, and we teach this, by the way, we have an integrative adult sleep coach certification program as well. We teach this also. What's called a readiness for change. You're going to determine how ready for change your client is. Because sometimes your client can be in the pre-contemplation, contemplation, maybe they're ready to take action. You want to find out right from the very beginning before you take any client on where they fall in that. How serious and ready are they to make a change? How determined they are? Or is it that they're just asking, they're curious, but they're not really committed for change yet? So that from the very beginning already is going to help you weed out the possibility of people that are coming to you, but are not so serious about moving forward and ready to make changes in their day-to-day. Now, let's say that you did have someone that was ready for change and they come to you. And you notice that after you do your consult and you go over your action step plan, that they're struggling. After the very first week, they were not able to maintain consistency. That could be for a number of reasons. It could be because the action step plan was not detailed enough. It was maybe very general. And you said to them, this week, take a pause during the day, sometime this week, right? Versus, okay, this week, let's talk about your schedule. When would be a really good time to take a pause? What time of day is most practical and realistic for you to take a pause? And they say, usually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's my lunch break, but I can carve out about 10 minutes. Great. From all the days of the week, from the 7 days a week, which days do you feel are the most practical for you to begin just implementing this? Let's try 3 days this week where you can commit to. So That's the detailed instruction. You're sorting out in a very detailed way with your client what's going to be practical, what's going to be realistic. You're going to meet them where they're at. That's one of the reasons that sometimes they can't be consistent, right? Because the instructions may have not been detailed enough. That leads me into the practicality. Sometimes the practicality doesn't really match, right? The action step doesn't match their lifestyle specifically. And maybe they're going to an extreme. So let's say that your client had never had any kind of bedtime ritual at all. But now we're giving them a bedtime ritual that consists of 5 or 6 steps. When you're starting out with something like that, you can imagine if you've never had that before, and there are exceptions, by the way, you will have people that can come forward and will conquer it and they're ready and they can do something like that. But for the average person to go from one extreme to the other, from no bedtime ritual to all of a sudden having a bedtime ritual that includes 5 or 6 steps, that can feel maybe in the beginning exciting, but then after a while, it's like you want to revert back to your old habits and patterns. So, a way to break that pattern or intercept that pattern is by starting to make shifts, small shifts, baby steps, where you're not necessarily going from one extreme to the other, but you might say, okay, let's start with one step. You've never had a bedtime ritual. Let's begin one. Let's begin one that only takes about 3 minutes and you're going to maintain that consistency. Can you commit to that? If it's just something small, something that starts with one step, then they can build from there. But if you go too far too soon, the chances that they're going to revert back to their old habits and then give up as a result and feel frustrated because they gave up and then they're like, forget this, that probability rises when there's too much too soon. So that could be another reason. Another reason, people may not always be so aware of how they're getting in their own way. So, one of the things that's very helpful, you mentioned CBTI, ACT, DBT in your things that you want to learn. These are really great tools. But one of the most important foundational tools, and this is what my holistic science of sleep method teaches, is motivational interviewing at the base. So we teach many things, but motivational interviewing is a really great opportunity to get your client through questioning to begin exploring and understanding how they're getting in their own way. And you're doing it in a neutral fashion. So what is great about motivational interviewing, it's not telling someone what to do. It's not making judgments. It's not about a right or a wrong. It's really about exploring a situation from a very neutral position where now the client really gets to see objectively what is going on. And from that place, they can make an empowering choice. But if they're not aware of how they're getting in their own way, then that intrinsic motivation and that may be lacking. So the inconsistency may come from a lack of motivation. It may come from an impracticality, something that's not realistically fitting into their lifestyle. And it may be because they're just not ready for change. There could be other reasons as well, but these are usually the top 3. So now you can understand that when you're working with adults, you want to ensure that there are some foundational elements that are set up in place that then allow you for that strong foundation to get to the next step. So what are your thoughts about hearing all this, Preeti?
Yes, actually, it gave me a different perspective about how I am approaching them. Maybe I should put more no, effort and start with my groundwork before I give them advice. So as I'm doing it as a volunteer work, I did not put in much, I guess. So I'm planning. I can actually structureize this program like my baby sleep program. I can actually
Mhm.
structureize, start with exploratory call and see their point of readiness, and then we'll
Yes.
check. Then I think I have to proceed from there on, I guess.
I commend you, honestly, I commend you for going out there, putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I'm going to learn, I'm going to explore. What you did is a great thing because you're pushing your boundaries, you're expanding and you're learning. And now you're recognizing and you're realizing, oh, all right, there's some foundational elements, there's some things that I can now start working on so that I can come better prepared when I work with these adults. And the fact that you reached out to me and now you're receiving even more support is going to help you further deepen your knowledge and your foundation, which is great.